My fancy contact with the universe says it's time. So welcome this morning. Thank you all for coming. Somehow in the bulletin, this was called Money, Maintenance, and Mission, but my real title is Maintenance, Mission, and Money. So a lot of you, well, not a lot of you, some of you have come up to me and thanked me for my work or whatever as the treasurer here at the church. And I want to just say, I may be the face and the voice of finances here at the church, but there's an awful lot of other people working on that. Many of you are here. Obviously, the staff and the ministers, the Board of Human Resources that works on compensation issues, campus keepers who've done all this work about determining what needs to be done on the campus and getting it done and so on. CMRB that works on compensation for the ministers, the endowment, which is not part of the budget, but does provide money for things that happen in the church council that passes on all these financial decisions and budgets, the congregation, obviously, that reviews and adopts the budgets and pledges and fulfills their pledges and things like that. So it takes a village. It's not me. Although, full disclaimer, the words and opinions you will hear today are not necessarily the official words and opinions of the United Church of Gainesville. A lot of what you hear today was my thoughts on these things, but I would also like to hear your thoughts when that opportunity arises. So my mission, since I've been treasurer, is trying to share more openly about financial matters in my newsletter articles and my presentations to the congregation, to church council, and I'm trying to maintain the trust of the congregation that the leadership really is working for the best interest of the church, and we need your trust so that you will support the leadership financially and the church financially. And so that's my mission, and that's why I thought I should do a seminar like this. I know many people are stressed about money. Money is one of those really difficult topics in your family discussions, or your children who come to you and they want money or whatever. But I was pointed out to me yesterday, stressed is just dessert spelled backwards. So who doesn't like dessert, right? And sometimes maybe we have a little too much dessert when we're stressed, but whatever. So I want us to, as a kind of a spiritual focus, remember our compact. That's kind of our through line. And there's a bunch of great verbs in there. We join as a spiritual community, to worship, to welcome, to learn, to grow, to follow, and to act. And a lot of money has to do with action. Giving money is an action, and supporting the mission is an action, however that's done. And also, one of my favorite phrases in the behavioral covenant that we read together this morning is taking personal responsibility. So let's leave our judgments at the door, and let's think about where we are and where we want to go. So I have a master's degree in accounting. That's why I feel like I can talk to you about money. But being a church and the accounting for church is very different. If you're a business, you have a product or a service, you have customers, you have cost of goods, you have expenses, you have maybe shareholders, you have a revenue stream, you're trying to make a profit. If you're a nonprofit, you actually may have a product or a service too, and you have your customers may be slightly different. Your customers may be the clients come to your thing, but your customers may also be that foundation or that grant or that government that gave you money to provide whatever product or service you do to individuals. And there may be rules about who your clients are. They have to meet certain eligibility requirements and so on. Church is very different. Everyone is welcome and there is no charge. So that's a challenge. And maybe we'll talk about that. And obviously when I talk about maintenance, I'm keeping the building in good working order and equipment and things like that. But maintenance is also about relationships with each other, the congregation with leadership, leadership with the congregation, how we function as a community. So money can be a part of that too. Anyway. So let's go ahead and start my PowerPoint. Let's see if I got it on here too. Give me a minute, I'm gonna bring it up here because I have notes. Oh, here they are, okay. So church was founded 60 years ago. And 50 years ago, we bought this building. I wasn't here. How many of you were here 60 years ago? 50 years ago? Yeah, all right. This is very cool. So Linda, is she here? Was tell me a story earlier that so this property was owned by a small Baptist church that had split off from First Baptist downtown, and story of caution, they had dwindled down to pretty much they went out of business and the city took the property one way or another. And the city wanted to build a fire station here. And there was a big uproar. The neighborhood didn't want that or whatever. So the members of UCG at that time decided, wow, we need a building. So Larry and Linda went down to City Hall for the bidding process, take and seal bids. Linda carried 2 bids. One if there were other bidders and one if there were no other bidders. And it turned out there were no other bidders, so the low bid went in and the church bought this building, and this is the original sanctuary. There were 3 lots, about 300 feet, which came somewhere past this church, but not all the way to the far end. Later on, the church bought 4 more lots plus a little bit of a 5th lot to get all the way through our parking lot. So this is kind of to tell you what that's all worth now. We didn't spend this much money, but the Alachua County property appraiser has put the just value for this land at $940,000 for these 7 and plus lots, and the building at almost $1.7 million. We don't pay any taxes on that, and we don't necessarily could sell that if we wanted to. I'm not suggesting we would, and I would never suggest that. We don't owe a lot of money on this property. We have a first mortgage was PNC Bank. It's started back when the sanctuary was built in the late 90s, right? And it's been paid down over time. It's been moved from several other institutions and refinanced several times, because mortgages in the commercial world tend to be, you pay like you're paying for 30 years, but you have a balloon payment in 5 years, and every 5 years you've got to refinance it. And so we've done that, but we only owe a little bit of money on that mortgage, which will be paid off with a partial payment early February next year. We had to go borrow $99,000 from Cornerstone, which is part of the United Church of Christ. They have a foundation, a financial thing that makes loans. And that came up when we were remodeling the East Wing, and we discovered we had a lot more work to do. We had to re-roof a bunch of the buildings. So the situation in 2022, we didn't have money to do that. We couldn't go to the congregation, quick, we need $100,000. So we borrowed the money and we got a great rate. We're paying like 3.75%. Get that if you can. And it does not have this balloon payment feature in it. It's straight up 30-year mortgage. So net equity, a little over $2.5 million. Now we have other assets. Obviously, we have all the equipment and chairs and tables and so on. And the only other debts we have are really current debts, like we got to pay the bills that came in this week. We got to make payroll next week when it's payday and things like that. But in general, the church is in pretty good financial shape in that respect. I mean, so I have a clicker. I'm supposed to do that. Okay. Here we go. So other assets get to be important because we tend to be a cash-based organization. We get our bills and we pay our bills. So we have money at PNC Bank and a regular account, one small account. And last year, the Board of Business moved a big chunk of our cash into a Merrill Lynch account, which has an interest rate that's kind of tied to Fed rates. At one time, we were making around 5%. Of course, that's come down some, but what do we do? Last year, we maybe had $11,000 in interest last year, and we're above 8,000 so far this year, something like that. Well, or 6,700 will be above 8,000 by the end of the year. A lot of that cash, we have accounting wise put it in what we call designated funds. And this is the thing we're going to talk about a lot today. This is where we've said, we want to hold this money back for some reason. Sometimes it's because a donor gave us some money. Ford Foundation, over the past couple of years, has given us $45,000. We can only do secular, non-religious things with that money. So we have to account for it separately and what we do with it separately. When we ask you to give money for a fundraiser for the youth group, that money has to go for the youth group. We can't just turn around and say, well, we really want to use it for something. But some of the things we've designated are just our own sort of planning things. So when you go to retreat, you pay a registration fee. And in past years, we had an accumulated money left over for that. And we sort of said, well, let's hold this money because next year we have to make a big deposit before we go on retreat. There's no reason we really have to do that, but it's kind of a cash management way of doing things. And then other things is for ministers, we have what we call continuing education expenses, but because it's hard to predict from year to year how much somebody might have to pay to go to a conference, if they don't spend all money in one year, we hold back that. So next year they can have whatever's budgeted plus whatever they spent. So there's a lot of ways that happens. But the sad part of that is now we only have a little less than $31,000 of unrestricted cash that we can do whatever we want with. To me, that's kind of problematic. If I was running an organization, I would want to have 96 days, 6 months worth of cash laying around. That's just better things. The endowment also has almost the same amount, actually a little bit more money invested than we have in cash. And it has its own rules. It's in a Vanguard and management account. It's doing real well. I think even after giving away the amount of money it gives away every year, it's still made more than 10% above whatever we've given away in the last couple of years. So the start of 2024 was only about $300,000. So we've given away money 2 years since, but it's 367,000. So that's great. Okay. Gotta remember, I'm control. So this is a different way of looking at church operations and money. We always talk about the budget. I stand up in front of the congregation and give budget reports. I stand up in front of the congregation and ask you to approve a budget and pledge to it. But a lot of money goes through all those designated accounts. So the real picture of the way church finances works for me is to look at those together. So this is for the first 8 months of this year. So 584,000 plus in giving, either through your pledges, plate collections, and so on. But into designated account, another $114,000 was given, just straight up donations, one way or another, into. We have our parking and rental income. We run that through a designated account because at the end of the day, we take most of it back into the budget, but some of it goes to groups that help clean up in the morning, after Sunday mornings before church and so on. The interest I was talking about, fundraising events, those little noodles and doodles and the chili lunch and et cetera. Registrations, go on the all church retreat, go on a women's retreat, go on the men's retreat, come to summer school, go on work tour. That's a lot of money that people pay to participate in an event. We have scholarship set asides. People, when you sign up to go to a retreat, you have a box you can check. I want to donate X amount of dollars for somebody else to go. So there is a designated account for scholarships. And then we have grants. So we have Alachua County CAP grant, which is a community agency partnership program, which supports food for kids. They give us $13,000 a year. I mentioned the Ford Foundation. This came about because a member there's some convoluted match thing, but a member arranged for a certain person to donate so much money, and the Ford Foundation will triple match that donation. So a $5,000 contribution in 2024 got us 15,000, a $10,000 contribution today. This year got us 30,000, so $45,000. That money is going to be used to support the work tour and some other youth programs going forward, but particular. And then we finally got a tax credit for the solar panels. There was about a 30, a little over 30% tax credit that we got this year. So almost $278,000 not in the budget coming into our operation. Yes. The question was, how do you get a tax credit if you don't pay any taxes? That's a great thing. This was part of the bill passed by Congress to the previous administration to induce people to invest in solar technology and especially written into that was the allowance for nonprofits to still claim the credit.
Does that mean we got cash?
We got a check from the IRS for $16,259. Yes, starting October 1st, that tax credit goes away in the new fiscal year. So we got it while we could.
Is it a one and done tax credit?
Yes, it's one and done.
Sure.
No. The question was, is it a one and done for the people online? You all can hear me. They listen. They can't necessarily care.
Please wait for the mic to be brought to you so anyone on Zoom can hear.
Yeah. Are there any questions on Zoom, by the way? Okay. So 8 months of operation in a year, $914,000 in revenue. That's a big number. And how have we spent that money? Well, we spent it on ministers, and that's Talia, Donna, our transition minister, our part-time, we used to call them the transition team. Seems like they've been doing it long enough. We ought to call them something else, but Chad and Ellen. Administration, the director of programming, the accountant, the director of operations, Dar, as, what do we call you, Dar? It's support staff, the most supportive of staff. Children and youth, so we have a director of children's ministry, all the child care aides, all the people that work with the various youth groups. Worship is our worship tech and our pianist, accompanist. And then all the benefits that go with that. Now, the big numbers, why are designated accounts paying benefits? Well, this year, through donations, through the endowment, and through some grant work that Talia did, there was a bunch of money available for her to take on for her sabbatical. So that came out of accounts that were designated otherwise. So I put it there. Obviously, we spend a lot of money on our space, maintenance, custodial. That goes back to my work in legal aid, if they talk about custody. Utilities, et cetera, operating expenses, all the supplies, the insurance. The list goes on. Let's see, what else? And then programs. Now, obviously, designated accounts, because most of the programs, most of the committees have some little pot of money that's been, they've either raised or has been given to them. And so a lot of, all that money we saw going into designated accounts, a lot of that's being spent through the designated accounts. They're not in the budget there, but this is our kind of mission work, as I would call it. We call it programs, but council and denominational, there's a little money that I think mostly has to do with educational expenses and then capital expenses. So this year we've spent 66,000 plus on capital expenses. 15,000 came from the budget. The rest came from people donating to, we have a designated account called Buildings and Improvement Account. We call it our capital reserve. That's where that money goes. Question. Yes. Where's the lady with the mic? Yes, Glenn.
Yes. Where we just spent $40,000 on AC
Yeah,
replacement.
yeah.
Which category did that fall into on this?
The easy answer is that money got written in September. This is through August 31st. I'll talk about that in a minute. So when you have to pick a cutoff date when you start making these numbers up. So yes, we did spend a bunch more money. Interesting fact, the designated account we saw on the previous screen, and hold on to this. Get back. Yeah, this $278,000, that's a little over 30% of the total revenue of that $914,000. So that's a big number of what goes on in this church that's not in the budget that I stand up here and ask you to vote on. But all the things that we see in this programming and whatnot doesn't happen if there's not all these administrative and ministerial staff and children and youth. The budget is supporting all that management, all that mission work, because we may spend a lot of children and youth over on the next screen, but we spent 58,000 out of plus benefits out of the church budget for people who do that work. One of the administrative persons is the director of programming that helps get things like retreats going and other programs. So don't think that we're not in the budget supporting our mission work. It's just the way it gets accounted for. In a perfect world, I would make everybody who works here do a little time and motion timesheet where they said how much time did they spend on every one of our little projects, and they'd probably all quit. But that's the way you do that, so you know what the true cost of any given program is. But
Now, also, there would be some money that would be.
John has a question. Yeah.
I have a question. Then also, in each of those programs, there might be more money given
Yes.
so that this doesn't capture all of that either.
Yes.
This is a really wonderful way of looking at it, so we
Yes.
see more of that.
Yes.
Thank you.
We might talk about this later, but one notion is maybe the giving to programs ought to give back to the administration. If you work at the university and you get a grant, the administration takes 10, 20% off the top. Oh, okay, it's changed since I was there. So there's this sort of, give and take, but we don't do that. And we probably shouldn't do that, but we should be aware that even if you don't give to a specific program, you do give the budget, you are supporting those programs. So let's talk about those programs, because this is a big thing. So adult programs, let me get this on my screen so I can tell you more about them. Actually, where's my window? Okay. The way. Sorry. Oh. I have so many things open on my screen. Okay. The adult board, all the includes all the retreats, the open infirming, a post-high group, which I don't think is active anymore. So sometimes what happens is we have a designated account for something that suddenly we're not doing anymore. Then we have to deal with that, but we're not going to decide that today. Various workshops, there's money for speakers, special events, the OWL training, although most of the OWL work that, are y'all familiar with that? The Our Whole Life, it's mostly been presented to children, but it ended up here. And it ended up here because once upon a time we had a designated fund for health things that started when Shelley Wilson retired, and a bunch of us at her, as an honorarium to her, donated money to a special thing. We were going to try to set up some kind of health ministry. That never happened. So church council and the suggestion of others decided, well, OWL is kind of a health related because it was done in Shelley's honor. We contacted Shelley and said, oh yeah, that's fine. Do what you will with it. And so that money moved into the OWL training program. And we, besides providing a service to our own children, we did a training where people from other congregations came here and were trained to be trainers, and people in our own congregation were trained to be training. So this work goes on, not just for us, but we're trying to spread it into the world. The children's program, there's a bunch that have to do with, Board of Youth and Family has a small amount of money. There was a contract called Real Kids, Real Faith that went through here. And it was a program that we got a contract from Union Seminary. The church had applied for some money having to do with children things for a grant. We didn't get it, but Union Seminary, which did get a grant, liked something about what was in ours, and they contacted us and then say, will you do this sort of pilot project under our grant? And we'll pay you to do that. It's a straight up deliverable. Talia did all the work, became a little bit part of her thesis, I believe, but we got $10,000 from that, and the church council let her have that money for her sabbatical because that was totally on her and she did all the work. So I'm sure she'd be happy to come in here and talk to us at length about that. There's not much in benevolence, arts, worship, personnel related. This is where the sabbatical money has gone through, but also where there's been money set aside for those training things. We typically have the ministers have a benevolent fund, although that might be in the miscellaneous sometimes. So when I recategorize stuff, facilities and equipment. Now there's bigger numbers here because facilities and equipment includes more than the buildings and ground money. We paid for our upgrade, update to our web page through this, although we only paid for someone to build the infrastructure for it. And then, what's RD's wife's name? Thank you. She did the work to actually put it online and fill the content for it. The numbers at the bottom, if those of you are paying attention, for receipts for designated accounts and expenses are different than what I showed you in the previous all church financial statement, because some of this money came from the budget. I took it out in my other report, but it's like of the $90,000 going in facilities and equipment, 15,000 of that came from the budget. A small amount of money came from the budget in the youth and children, and some money, like what I talked about for Talia's sabbatical, move between, they get taken out of one designated account and added to another. So they're kind of buried in those totals. So there is some of that. Okay. Questions here? So, and then the big thing, capital expenditures. So we spent a lot of money and we raised a lot of money on capital things in the last 3 years. And it actually is more than that. If you go all the way back to 2022, when we started the education wing, new roofs over there, new roofs around the little covers in the courtyard. A lot of insulation has been replaced. Playground has been fixed. A lot of wood has been fixed. We had the solar panels installed. We've repurposed the seminar A, B, and C. We reinforced a lot of stuff. We've replaced 9 air conditioning units. We remodeled these bathrooms over here in the West Wing. So a lot has gone on. These are the things we were asked about a minute ago. So we do, in this month, we've just paid this week, $41,833 for the 2 huge sanctuary AC HVAC units. We just ordered a new mini split for the kitchen. We've contracted to replumb the sanctuary, and this is a sad tale that we discovered sometime in July that there was a water leak in the sanctuary, in the plumbing. And we discovered it because the utility bill in July was incredibly high and the water amount was incredibly high. And it got fixed in July, but not till after we had already spun out a bunch more water. So the August bill for utilities was incredibly high also. So, but that's been fixed, or somebody busted, we got a leak detector, we found the leak, they busted a hole in the slab, they repaired the pipe, but now we want to go back and do a more permanent fix. And we've just signed a contract for an engineering study that has to do with drainage. If you're familiar, there's some ongoing debate about what to do with all the water that runs off our roof. Do we have it? How bad is the problem? How do we fix that? So we say, let's get some expert advice. There'll be a summit on the 16th here, Tuesday, if you want to come and hear what that engineer has to say. So our current really available funds is down to about 82,000. That's way better than it was back in 2022 when we had to go out and borrow $100,000. So kudos and thank you to everybody who has given money for that. Let's see. So that's the end of the slides, but there's a lot more that needs to be done. Yes, sir, Eric. One moment.
As chair of the Campus Keepers Buildings and Grounds, we call it a lot of different things.
Yeah.
I want to express gratitude for all those folks who, and you could probably break down the numbers for me, but all of that money that you see being spent up there in the last 3 years, a lot of it has come from direct donations from the congregation. Some of it came out of the budget, normal kind of budgeting amounts, but the vast majority came from people donating directly saying, hey, I really want to make sure that this gets fixed. I'm going to personally give. So I want to express gratitude for that.
Yeah.
That was kind of like the solar panels.
Yeah.
That was kind of an over and above thing. It didn't come out of the budget. It was just 3 people who got together and said, we want to have solar panels. So I'm very grateful that that has happened.
Right. So challenges for buildings and ground, and I'm sure there are more, but I'll list big 3. You may have noticed that we never have this door open, and you may have seen the videos because there's a settlement issue going on here where they bind now. The floor is sagged, and the whatever. So we have a quote from Ramjap. I don't know if you see them on TV where they come in and lift things up. That's about $13,000 plus, which to me, I was like surprised. I know people have had to do this to the house. I was kind of like, oh, wow, that seems like a bargain. We'll see. There'll be other expenses beyond if we go with that and it gets the floor back level and everything level. There'll still be some other facade fixes where there's cracks in the facade outside. We'll probably want to get a new accordion door. That'll be a chunk of change too. That's one. Whatever we decide we can and need to do about drainage, we'll have a longer discussion. I think the people involved all agree that water needs to be better managed. Someone told me it was in the construction building. The thing about buildings, it's all about water. Where does the water come from and where does the water go? So it's either plumbing, it comes in and goes down the drain, or it comes off your roof and sits in your yard or in your parking lot or whatever. So, and we live in a pretty wet state. Maybe not this week, but normally it's a pretty wet state. And the other thing has to do with the water supply. So we said this building we bought it in 1975. It was built in 1950 something, I think, or I'm not sure the exact date, but it wasn't a new building when we bought it. The water supply into this building is a residential line. We're a much bigger campus than you would normally run off of a residential line. So we have to investigate how do we upgrade our water service. So those are kind of the 3 short-term big ticket items we have to deal with. There are other ones. We want to remodel the kitchen. We have to plan for the future. We've replaced most of the roofs in this thing in my tenure, but roofs don't last forever. You have to paint every now and then, you have to kind of, even though we've replaced 9 AC units, there's 5 more to go, and they don't last forever. We went well beyond their lifetime we got lucky for the most part, although virtually everyone we've replaced so far, we replaced because it failed. It's kind of like, all right. Anyway, so what do we do about that? So a lot of work has been done about the future of the church already. We did a financial sustainability. We had a committee back in 2022, and they issued a report, and some of us read it. And it was about how do we make sure we have enough money going forward. I'm not going to quote that whole report, but they also had some recommendations about how to grow the endowment. We started talking about a capital campaign, and then some other things got in the way, and we kind of put all that on hold. So one thing I want to point out, and I look around the room, we're an old church. Like I said, and it's great that there are people here who've been in this church for 50 years, but I'm not sure what the exact age, but I can tell you that 77% of our pledge income comes from people who are 65 and older. And I can guarantee you, even though we've done this convergence thing about visioning, where do we want to be in 50 years? We ain't going to be here in 50 years. I wonder for the people who were here 50 years ago what their vision was, and have we realized that vision, or has it all been different? I think about myself 50 years ago. I know I'm still me, but God, I never would have envisioned standing here in front of you talking about church finances 50 years ago. I would have been ruining my ears, so I listening to loud rock and roll, playing loud rock and roll music or something like that, or starting a family. And I think the people who were here 60 years ago left us a great legacy, and the people who were here 50 years ago laid a foundation. And we who are here now need to kind of step up and leave a legacy and a foundation for the next, not just the next generation. Some of our next generation are members here too. I see some of them here. My next generation and the generation of that go to this church. But I want, the generation even after that, that there's a church, however known, that can keep going. So there are a lot of ways you can help with that. Obviously, the first thing is to fulfill your pledge for this year. Our budget is in decent shape based on my projection for this year, but part of that projection is that a significant portion of you actually pay your pledges. Pledge for next year, because it doesn't matter about the future if we can't make it year to year. We got to have the baseline. But we need to think about those of us who are of a certain age and maybe have a certain amount of resources. Can't ask this of everybody. I can only ask that of people who can. Need to think about how and if they can do more, not for the regular pledge campaign, but for something bigger and more long-term. Obviously, we can giving to the capital campaign and trying to have the Board of Business set a goal for a big number. In our capital campaign thing, it was a really big number to have an endowment for capital needs. I think we're more inclined to say right now, let's get $60,000 for the 60th year. Let's make that our short-term goal. And for the endowment, the notion is let's give to you can give to the endowment. That's an even long-term gift. If you're so inclined. How many of you have something in your will that has something to do with UCG? A few of you, yeah. This is a great way to put a number or percent that just to remember UCG. And it's not due now. It's due later. as late as you want it to be and as it can be. But, you know, it's a good thing to do, to remember the church and what it's meant to you in your will. There are a lot of ways to give. If you have an IRA, you can make a charitable distribution from your IRA to any nonprofit. This is how I've paid my pledge the last couple of years. If you don't have an IRA, but you have some other kind of retirement account that has a rollover, you can go get an IRA and roll some money into it. That's how I did it. I didn't have an IRA until this came up. I said, what? I've got all this money over here. I can just go move some of it into a different mechanism and give it. So let's see. The other thought, though, again, about endowment, short term, $60,000 for the endowment for not that you go out and die and you give to the endowment, but maybe you think about that. I think in the financial feasibility study, there was some notion if every member gave an X number of dollars to the endowment every year for so many years, we'd have $1 million in not too long amount of time. And it was a small number, it's like less than $200, but it was based on 700 members. So the math may not work too. And the other thing that we were thinking about was, let's rethink how we give to programs. Classic example, Food for Kids has almost $60,000 available to it. It's a very popular program. It's very easy to say to the congregation, feeding hungry kids. But it's not just your gifts. $13,000 from the county. Clay Electric gave the Food for Kids $11,000 this year. So it would take, if nobody gave any money to Food for Kids, it would take them 3 years to spend $60,000. So maybe, and this I've tried to have this thought too, before you stand up in front of the congregation and ask for money, know how much money you have and know how much money you need. Because that's a more reasonable thing to do to have when you ask for money. Well, we only have this much money. We really need this much money. Can you help make up the difference? So the biggest thing in our designated mission accounts that's always we're trying to raise money for has to do with children and youth. Work tours are very expensive. Ford Foundation grant is providing some money because we take that as a secular activity. But if you wanted to donate extra to a mission, I would suggest you give to youth and children, because that's our future. That's how my children were raised here in this church. And that's how my grandchildren are getting raised here in this church. So anyway, that's kind of my pitch. Does anybody have any comments, questions, or concerns? We have a mic down front. We got Ann and then Jane.
I remember going to a number of seminars back, probably the 2022, around the capital campaign. And one of the numbers that sort of jumped out at me was that we needed $500,000 for the parking lot. It was like, well, that's not going to be a very sexy thing to pay for a parking lot. And I don't hear anything about that in this presentation. So is that not an issue really anymore?
That's an issue for debate, and I think Eric could probably be better to discuss that or mention that,
And
and maybe Carol too.
yeah, I'll try to be brief. Some of the things on that list, it was a big long list, and it added up to a few
3 million.
million. Yeah, it was millions. Some of the things on that list were, if we had the money, gosh, this would be nice to do. There are other things on the list, like those new 10-ton HVAC units that are not, wow, that would be really nice to have air conditioning in the sanctuary on Sundays. No, that's not like a nice to, that's a have to. So there are some things so I would offer, in my opinion, that the parking lot, would be nice to do some upgrades in there, but again, the operative word is nice to, not have to. So that's kind of where that went. Hope that answers your question.
I think Carol wants to speak to this issue, and then we'll come to you, Jane.
Yes, I was involved in gathering the figures for the parking lot restabilization, and it's 400,000. And yeah, and it is going to be spoken about at the drainage summit on Tuesday night. If you want to come, you're welcome. And also, we have another parking lot that needs stabilization, and that figures 140,000. And a lot of the figures that came for campaign vision were things that I think we spent like $400,000 in the last 3 years in that list.
Yeah, if you add in
Yeah,
the renovation over here,
renovation
definitely.
And all the things that we've done over the last 3 years. So the others are possible money-making ideas, like a commercial kitchen, which we do have a design if we wanted to pursue it. There's a lot of things that were on the wish list during the capital campaign, but we're going to know a lot more after the summit about the parking lot and the pools of water that collect there and the remodeling of that drainage system out there, the retention pond.
All right, so I think we're gonna let Jane go, and then we go Catherine.
I really appreciate your work.
Ah.
I mean, this is like, I was on the Board of Business for 3 years, and I mean, the way things flow through those designated accounts was somewhat challenging.
History, yeah.
It's a mystery, and I'm all for having a more nimble process when funds are languishing in certain accounts and other funds need accounts. We talk about system-wide change in UCG. I mean, I would trust persons on the Board of Business. I know this is a bylaw change, something, but to just use some common sense to move stuff around. And the other thing is that I really appreciate an approach where I'm asked to fund something that's needed, and I'm not asked to fund something that we have loads of money in a designated account just because we always ask in November for this. I mean, I think it's better stewardship. And I think about Alachua Conservation Trust, right? They give me a postcard. We're raising money for Orange Lake Overlook. Can you help? I mean, I think there's some room at UCG to kind of have our business people kind of direct us more, educate us more about that. Thank you.
Welcome. And Catherine?
Okay, one question I want to clarify. The parking summit here is both parking lots? Just one?
It's about drainage. Yeah,
Okay,
it's just,
now that even though the capital campaign didn't get off the ground as it had planned, so many people in this congregation contributed to the capital fund, even without official campaign. So I want to thank everybody.
yeah.
Some of you are in this room.
And I know Catherine takes care of doing those thank yous, because I tell one of the odd things here is all I know about donations to the church is what I donate. I have no idea who gives. Unless you walked up to me and said, I have X amount of dollars to give, where should I put it? And that has only happened once. So thank you for being here. And does Donna have some parting comments maybe? Yes, please.
I just wanted to say thank you for this wonderful presentation. It really helped me. I've been staring at these papers and I needed to see them like this. So good for you. Way to go. Couldn't come at a better time. Secondly, I think I've repeated this over and over that my client here is your next pastor. my client here is your next pastor. And I would dread any eventuality that happened in, one of these larger capital projects falling in their lap year of their tenure. Even the second. And maybe by the third year, they will be able to provide financial, giving, et cetera. And so that's why it's important to do something. It's really important to make sure we have done all the risk management we probably possible. I don't know if it's drainage or if it's the pipe or what it, but I can imagine in a place this complex and beautiful, something going wrong. So pick your project, or better yet, pick the project that you think might involve us in the.
Right.
Into endowment frees people to make decisions when these risks occur, right? So that's a really, you don't know, and we don't know. Give money so that when it happens, we have the money and you're not sticking a new master with it, or the responsibility, especially if it involves closing something down for a while. You see how difficult that could be in the startup of a ministry. So the time to spend money during an interim.
Right.
Amen.
Amen. So just one parting comment for me, I didn't talk about next year's budget because that's almost settled. It will go before church council this week and it'll be on the agenda in October 5th. And my hopefully well-written article for the new October newsletter will talk about that, so that hopefully I will have answered your questions before we get there. But anyway, once again, thank you for your love of this church and your participation and presence. Have a great day.